Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. And of course, I am guest hosting for the day. It's a gorgeous Wednesday. My name is Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. We've got a great show lined up for you this afternoon. My good friend, my great friend, actually, Michael Campina, is on the line with us. He is he's a journalist. He's a photographer. He freelances for the Charleston City Paper and the Pulitzer Prize winning Post and Courier. You can get him at www.michaelcampina.com. That's CAMPINA.com. You can get him on Facebook at Michael Campina Photographs. And we are here today. We're going to talk a little bit about Antifa because he was at one of the Confederate monument protests. There was one in Charlottesville and there was also one in Charleston, and they're sort of calling it Charlottesville Light. But he actually got in the middle of he got into the thick of it. Got some really, really great photographs. We're going to put it in the liner notes below. But he has a little bit of insight because we both grew up in South Florida together. And as all of you know, and of course Mike knows, I am a non-disabled, straight, cis white male, which means I was born as a life form lower than the kind of microbial scum that you might find on your toilet seat. But my good friend Mike Campina, however, is a non-disabled, straight, cis Latino male. So he is also scum, but slightly less scummy than I am. We both grew up in multicultural, diverse South Florida, Miami, Florida, a sanctuary city. But since I am a cis white male, I can't talk about race. And I just wanted to bring Mike onto the show because since he's a different race than I, he can actually talk about race. And we can actually get to the bottom of this whole race thing. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brett, that was great.
It's awesome to have you. So one of the first things that we're going to talk a little bit about Antifa. We're going to talk a little bit about the white nationalists. We're going to talk about the Confederate monuments. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about what it was like for you growing up in Miami, Florida, as far as race, concerning race and racial harmony and social harmony. What was it like growing up in Miami as a Latino, and how aware were you that all non-disabled, straight, cis white men are racist, bigots, sexist, homophobes?
Oh, Miami. Well, growing up in Miami was definitely a unique situation, like anybody's hometown would be to them. But there were some things that made it special. And my unique experience with race and being Latino actually goes a level even deeper because I don't look Latino, actually.
Right. Campina. Michael Campina.
Didn't you ask me one time if I was adopted?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, like, growing up in multicultural South Florida and me being in a family that was blended and, the thing about Latinos is that, you can be every shade of skin color,
right?
And all be living in the same house and all be direct blood relatives.
Right.
And that was something that I think I took for granted before I finally made my way into the actual American South. My last job in Miami before I left, I was working for the Miami New Times. And our department was all Latinos, a female and 3 men. And in that department itself, even though we were all Hispanic, I was the lightest shade. Our boss was the darkest, and Andrea, she was kind of like a café con leche. Shout out to my Miami people. And my boy George was also a mixed race Latino because he had some German blood in him. And really, it wasn't a big deal. One of my nicknames in Miami is Ghost Pepper. Ghost Pepper, given to me by my colleagues at the Miami New Times because I'm white and spicy, according to them.
White and spicy.
So Ghost Pepper. And those are the kind of things that we say to each other where we openly acknowledge the color of our skin. And it's actually it's actually seen as an enjoyable conversation, something to laugh about, kick around, just everyday talk. It's I never thought that Miami was a sophisticated town about anything. I mean, it's a metropolitan city for sure, but I never thought there was anything overly sophisticated about it compared to any other big city or medium-sized city until the race issue became so in my face these days.
Right.
And I realized that without really even knowing it, the people that I associated with on a regular basis were pretty sophisticated on the whole concept of race. Nobody really cared at all. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you make an issue about race in a place like Miami, it's kind of suicidal. I mean, you have every culture on the planet there.
Right.
You'll run into Russians and Eastern Europeans and Brazilians and French people and, Arabs and, is it okay to say Arab?
Yes. On this show, it is okay to say Arab, but just not okay to say the F word.
And that's the problem. I never had to worry about that before, really. And it was okay. We would use words with each other to describe the way we looked and where we came from. And another layer of being Hispanic, it's just so nitty, is that all the different cultures within the region are all extremely antagonistic to each other in a loving way.
Yeah.
Every country has its own take on the language. They have their own slang. They have their own customs, their own food. We don't all eat tacos. And it's really offensive to some people to be called another race, which you're not. But go ahead.
You know what's funny about South Florida? South Florida is just the one place where everyone is equally kind of douchey. Everyone is a little bit, there's prejudices that go on everywhere in the world. But of course, Miami is such a culturally diverse place that, you're going to find your little enclaves, and you're not going to find one race that's more like racist than the other. It's just the kind. But what I've actually noticed, in fact, is that a lot of the Latino community, they're very judgmental. And in fact, we've got a quick hard break coming up. But one of the things that you mentioned was that among the Latino community, there's light skin, there's dark skin. And today, that actually has ramifications with intersectional feminism, because if you have lighter skin, then you are more privileged. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get back. We'll be right back. Get me at Shaq General on Twitter.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful four-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.
Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the disgruntled millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. I am Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. We are here today with Michael Campina, a photographer who was on ground zero of the Charleston anti-Confederate monument rally, the white nationalists versus the Antifa folks, which to me looks like a bunch of socialists duking it out with each other. I don't like any of them. But we are here today with Michael Campina. He is a photographer in Charleston. He was just telling us about basically one of the things that he didn't even realize growing up, which is that, you know, people have light skin privilege, dark skin privilege. You know, there's different kinds of Latinos all around South Florida and, of course, all around the country. But growing up, until race and color and all this became a big deal again, it didn't really peek its ugly head. Let me ask you something, Mike. What was it like moving to Charleston? Was it a culture shock?
No. It should have been. I did spend some summers, full disclosure, in Beaufort. My uncle was stationed at Parris Island. He's a Marine, Semper Fi. And I would go visit him and my aunt. I'd visit them and spend summers. It's about an hour and a half from here. And yeah, I mean, at the time growing up, it was very different for me to come out to such a slow pace. But I think after, 30 some odd years of the, Miami style of living, the nightlife, it was a welcome change. Right. Southern hospitality is a real thing. And I like it, to be honest. Yeah.
Did you, I mean, because what they say, because of course all these states are, they call these Republican states the flyover states, the states that, they don't really matter. They don't really represent mainstream America. And a lot of these smaller communities, these slower paced communities get pinned as being these, they're just a bunch of redneck racists. Did you notice a lot of racism when you moved to Charleston?
I started to really pick up on something different from where I'm from when I started to see all the Confederate flags everywhere. And it's not very obvious at first. I had moved here a year after they took the flag down from, forgive me for not knowing, but it was over the State House. I'm sorry. I don't recall right away, but it was big in the national news, and I think it was the first state to really start to, call attention to this controversy over the flag.
Right.
And they brought it down, and it was met with a lot of controversy, but it was also met with a lot of applause. And so I think that there has been lately this move to kind of start to, take away some of these symbols. It's not very apparent, in the downtown areas, but once you start getting out into the plantation areas, where the big old houses are, and you'd be surprised how many flags you will see.
What's your take on the whole Confederate flag? Because I know moving from South Florida, you grow up in the public school system in South Florida. It's very, very progressive. It's very, very liberal. The Nazis, you're taught as though they are these right-wing, extreme right-wingers, when in fact, the Z in Nazi stands for socialist, which is a left-wing philosophy. But, you're taught that, communism was sort of brushed under the rug, even though 200 million people died as a result of communism in the 20th century. But Nazism is the big sort of kahuna when it comes to teaching about the evil that happened in the 20th century. And these days, Nazism and the Confederate flag are sort of grouped into one big whole sort of right-wing philosophy that liberals can use to sort of bludgeon folks with. Now, when you're taught that in South Florida, it's, you're taught that the Confederate flag is equal to racism. If you fly a Confederate flag, there's nothing about the tradition. There's nothing about states' rights. They don't teach you about states' rights in liberal education when it comes to the Confederate flag. But do you think that the Confederate flag is synonymous with racism? Like, for example, if someone flies a Confederate flag, can you be absolutely sure that that person is a racist?
No, you can't. And this is where it gets really dicey. You really can't. You really can't generalize, especially about something that's so delicate, and the ramifications of being branded racist are so devastating to career and reputation. I mean, I think that there are certain cultural nuances that may not be understood to a lot of people. Certainly, I don't understand a lot of them. But I reject the idea of wholesale removing someone's right to, honor or cherish or remember anything that they value as part of their history. And that's probably where the biggest problem in the national discourse is going, is that if it's vogue to be against something, it doesn't matter if you have a right to express yourself. You just shut down and you're just not allowed to speak anymore. That's not what I remember growing up learning about the idea of freedom of speech.
Right. It's kind of ironic that these folks who say that they're trying to support the American way. It's un-American to have, it's the rebel flag, to wave the Confederate flag. It's the rebel flag. Then in the next breath, they want to shut it down, which is basically shutting down your free speech, which is a quintessential, fundamental aspect of what it means to be an American, to embody and embrace the American way, per se. So, to me, the hypocrisy is absolutely blaring. Now, you were at a rally recently, which was a rally to preserve some of the Confederate monuments. And as we both know, in Charlottesville, someone was killed during one of these rallies. What was the tone like when you got to the rally and started taking pictures? And what was the difference between the two sides, the Antifa side and the white nationalist side?
Well, that was interesting. That week we had experienced the nightmare that happened in Charlottesville, and it was a citywide thing. And that sentiment, that energy started to kind of bleed into other southern cities, and Charleston kind of picked up where kind of Charlottesville left off, but it didn't pick up in the same fashion. There's something really unique about Charleston. It's a very slow town. It's a very polite town. I think that this town is too polite to riot. I might be wrong. But
they have these Antifa people shipped in. A lot of the anti white protesters are there. The Antifa protesters, they're there because they're being bussed in. There's a lot of Craigslist ads that are basically like, oh, come on out for $15 an hour and show your support, paid protesters. I mean, that's not really the spirit of a protest, but if violence does break out, I would presume that these people are shipped in, bussed in, and sort of probably a part of some big George Soros scheme to basically pad the numbers, to increase the numbers of the protesters. We're going to talk a little bit more about this when we get back. Get me at Shaq General on Twitter.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. The Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into the Kevin Jackson Radio Show, and of course, I'm guest hosting for the great Kevin Jackson while he is away triggering lefties all around the country. This time, he'll be triggering lefties in New York. He's going to be on some morning shows. He's going to be on some radio shows, and I am holding down the fort in his stead. We are now talking with my great friend and good buddy, very, very talented photographer who lives in Charleston, where basically the Charlottesville Light protests are happening. I mean, these Confederate monuments are littered all around the South. And of course, funny thing that the left is deciding to do this now. Why now? I mean, doesn't it seem so stupid? Doesn't it seem like they're wasting all of their political capital on something that's just kind of basic? It's a little bit boring if you ask. Why now? Why not when Obama was president? Why not when Bill Clinton was president? Why not when Jimmy Carter was president? I don't get it. But anyway, we're here with Mike Campina. He's a photographer. He's going to tell us what it was like on the ground zero of the Charleston protest and rally to basically preserve and to destroy and move the Confederate monuments. Mike, tell us a little bit about what it was like on the ground.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect. You don't really know what to expect a lot of times when these things happen so quickly and you're rushing onto a scene. It was a modest group. There wasn't a whole lot of people, I got to be honest. They were gathering together. They were rallying around the idea of removing the statue, the monument to John C. Calhoun, who is known for being a proponent of slavery, and his theories on politics heavily influenced the secession from the Union. And so what I saw would look like more like a few dozen local students, known activists in the city, coming together and kind of rallying around the statue, calling for the removal of the Heritage Act, which, if I'm not mistaken, they have to repeal that to get an open discourse on actually taking the statues down. So there are some legals that they have to go through before they can take these statues down, not like the way some of them have been ripped to the ground. Right. And so that's one thing about Charleston that's very commendable, is that, I do find that it's a city that respects itself and wants to do things the right way as much as it can. The opposition to this, I guess what some would call the left, was a much smaller group, actually. There were about two guys.
Two guys. But before you go on, how many people were on the white nationalist side, the Nazis in the party?
I would say there was 50 plus.
50 plus Nazis. 50 plus. Wow. This is an amazing, catastrophic, amazing, incredible number. I mean.
Oh, wait. Hold on. No. I mean, are you talking about the
people who were defending the monuments?
Oh yeah, no. There was only like 2 or 3 guys in the crowd, and then there was probably maybe 5 or 6 off in the distance, kind of dressed in some military fatigue, looking a little intimidating, or maybe that's just how they dress every day.
But all right, yeah, that's good. But the way the left makes it seem is that like the South is swarming with these rabid racists that just want to string up. They want to bring back lynching. They want to bring back, segregation. They want to bring back Jim Crow. And, oh my God, some of them even want to bring back slavery. And that not just that there are these radical people there, but that the South is swarming with them. And then they're so rabid that they're all going to show up to these rallies to, was that really the case? Is it really the case that Charleston is this awful, terrible, racist place? Or, I mean, did it seem like there were other motives other than racism, I guess is what I'm getting at?
No, I mean, I don't see a lot of it. I mean, I know that if you ask a Black American who's been living here their whole life, they probably have plenty to tell. Probably plenty of stories to tell from their grandparents too. But as an outsider looking in, and as a journalist who meets all walks of life every week, there is a kind of like a sour note in the air, between the races, but nothing any different than I experienced growing up in Miami. I mean, it's a national shame. Right. That we have.
So essentially, breaking it down, what you're saying is that growing up in multicultural sanctuary city Miami, you didn't really experience more or less racism than in the deep South, Charleston, South Carolina, the home of slavery, Jim Crow, and all the stuff that we hate.
Not necessarily, and I think it's an interesting point to make. Not defending anybody or any side, but. This rally took place a block away from where the Emanuel 9 shooting took place a couple years ago. And that young man, I'm not going to say his name, was a sick person. He was a sick person. And he attached himself to an ideology on the fringe of mental reasoning. Right. Which is what a lot of sick people do. And I saw the Vice clip that was shot in Charlottesville, and it was very telling, and it was an amazing piece of documentation. And it was very shameful to see these young white men being so open about, their ignorance. They were trying to be intimidating, I think, in some ways. But the guy who killed that young woman was mentally ill.
Right.
He was mentally ill, and he attached himself to fringe ideas to satisfy his murderous thirst, really.
Right.
So it's when somebody crazy wearing your team shirt does something insane, unfortunately everybody on that team gets called insane. But that's not constructive to the overall dialogue.
Right. Well, I mean, what the left wants to do is they want to pin the entire group of conservatives on the actions of a very few mentally ill people, and basically sort of negate the fact that they're dismissing the entire ideology in the first place. Now, a few months ago, Steve Scalise was shot in the leg, and he was in critical condition for a while because of some deranged Bernie Sanders supporter. And most of the conservatives that I know didn't go out saying, Bernie Sanders is inciting violence. And that's one of the things that you hear a lot. Donald Trump is inciting violence. Jeff Sessions is inciting violence. It's just a matter of time until the gays are taken away and the blacks are put back in chains. And even Joe Biden just a few years ago said, the conservatives, they want to put you all back in chains. Absolutely ridiculous scare. I mean, they call us the scaremongers. But even when a conservative was shot in the leg by a deranged Bernie bro, most of us came out and said, okay, yes, the leftist philosophy does promote violence, but Bernie Sanders himself didn't promote violence, and he didn't himself call out for violence. To me, that's one of the distinguishing differences of the two different sides. Did you see that manifest while you were there at the protest?
Did I see? I didn't see a lot manifest. What I saw was several dozen young college students and very upset, mostly white young people, sharing a megaphone, calling for the removal of the statue, and sharing stories. This went on for about an hour and a half. And finally, the 2 or 3 guys from the secessionist party who were wearing their rebel flag shirts, one of them says something to the effect of, like, I'm a proud descendant of a Southern hero or something like that. I don't know, the kind of stuff you buy in a gift shop, just really just silly stuff. And, like,
yeah.
And, like, these guys were, filming it with their iPhones or whatever they had. And, after hearing, one side talk for a long time, I'm very centrist in my ways of being. I like to hear all sides, even if it's unpleasant. And I was kind of eager to hear what the secessionist party had to say. I mean, I really wanted to hear it. I mean, not that I would agree with it or anything. I just was curious. I heard one side talk for long enough, and, I was ready to hear the other side. And so one of the 2 or 3 guys that actually had the courage to kind of be in the crowd started to speak up. And I was very disappointed when that crowd just booed him and cursed him out and screamed at him and catcalled him. And he tried a couple times, I got to say. He was trying to keep his composure. It reminds me of my military uncle who just, won't lose his cool. He'll just keep on talking until he realizes there's just nothing he can say. And
right. So the white supremacists, the nasty, awful, terrible racists people got up there to speak some whatever they wanted to speak, and the Antifa folks wouldn't let them talk. The Antifa folks mostly being a bunch of white folks, basically, was what you're saying.
Yeah, it was disappointing. It was disappointing because I got to see what exactly is wrong with the way we treat each other now and why nothing works.
And we're going to talk just a little bit about that when we come back. Yeah. We got a hard break coming up. Get me at Shaq General. We're talking with Mike Campina. We will be right back.
Kevin Jackson on the Black Sphere Radio Network.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. And of course, I am Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in Northern Florida, where I am always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, sexism, homophobia, and patriarchy. And let's not forget your toxic masculinity. We are here with Michael Campina, a photographer who is in ground zero at the Charleston Confederate rally where white supremacists and Antifa, about 50 of each of them were having it out. We keep on hearing about how the South is this awful, terrible, racist place where racists and KKK are just swarming around trying to lynch black people and bring back Jim Crow and bring back slavery. But unfortunately, this Charleston rally was a little bit anticlimactic in that way. There weren't droves and parades of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of white supremacists. It was really just a bunch of people, a small little bunch of people who were just making a bunch of noise on a certain day. So, Michael, let's talk. Yes. Let's talk about the difference between Antifa and the white nationalists. What were the speeches like, and what were the responses like?
All right, so I have to correct you here for a moment. I'm sorry. There was about 50 on the left, if we're going to call them left, and about 3 on the right.
Oh my God.
So,
yeah. So, in other words, there were about 3 white nationalists there. Okay. The left you would think that there was about 3 million, considering how insane the left is going over this stuff.
And we'd have to be even more fair, I think, and just say that they were members of the secessionist party or sympathetic towards having ancestors who lived in the antebellum South and fought for a cause that they believe in. And I guess it's their right to believe in whatever they want, I guess.
Right. Not necessarily racist. I mean, like I said earlier, these could have been 3 guys who just want states' rights and want their independence and want staunch independence. Maybe that's it. Maybe it was nothing racially motivated whatsoever. But in that vein, let's continue.
Yeah. So, as far as that day went, most of my colleagues would be considered left-leaning. Or progressive or whatever, and I love my people. Most people assume that I'm left-leaning because of the nature of my work and, certain views that I have on life, but I'm rather kind of the person that just whatever makes sense, I go with that. Right. If somebody on the right makes sense, then cool, let's go with that. If somebody on the left makes sense, ideology I feel like is destructive for the overall dialogue. And, I really, really, really wanted to get into what my young, passionate anti-monument protesters were getting into, but there came a point where I just didn't understand what we were talking about.
Well, what were the anti-monument protesters even talking about during their speeches? What were the points of view that they were trying to bring across? Were they just basing everything on emotion, or were they citing statistics about how Confederate monuments increase racially motivated crimes, or what was it? Was it just them just on a microphone just screaming bigot, racist, homophobes? Like what was it?
It was more like the latter. It was they were sharing a megaphone. So anybody who wanted to share their thoughts, and people would come up and they'd basically just share anecdotes. You know, one kid talked about how his father, a black kid, talked about how his grandfather, was pinned down by a bunch of white guys in his youth and poured hot water on his head, and he had forever had scars on the back of his head where he couldn't grow hair. And he told that to his grandson his whole life to not forget that. Things like that, you know what I mean? It almost felt like a cathartic release, you know, for a community of people who maybe have not had enough open dialogue over the years, and this was just like a forum for everybody to just kind of tell their truth. I did kind of wonder where some of the hysteria was coming from. One lady in particular, don't quite understand where she was going with the whole thing, but apparently a relative of hers was a judge at the trial of a man named Robert Smalls. Now, Robert Smalls was a slave who captured a Confederate ship and tried to go to freedom. He later went on to do great things with his life, be political. But during his trial, her great-great-grandfather tried to work against and, try to convict him for his crimes. And so she was there to apologize for her great-great-grandfather. And I don't understand why. Why the guilt?
Right.
I mean, that part I just don't quite understand yet.
Let me explain this to you a little bit. It's a part of this whole white privilege / white guilt culture where we're white people. If you have lighter skin, even not even just white people, anyone who has lighter skin, you can have a black person with lighter skin and they have light skin privilege. The whole point is the closer you are to being white, the closer you are to being guilty. And if you have that kind of guilt where you have this white skin, so for example, this person's grandparent tried to prosecute this slave. It's just this collectivist mindset where you are responsible for someone else's actions. If you eat a bowl of soup, another person doesn't get full. If you eat a bowl of stew, another person doesn't get full. If another person eats a bowl of stew, you don't get full. This is why collectivism is essentially and fundamentally wrong. You can only be responsible for your own actions. And what you're saying is that this Antifa person was basically trying to apologize for her grandparents. It's like holding somebody responsible for actions that they didn't do. And the part of white guilt that really makes me upset is that people who generally have good intentions and want to make the world a better place are brainwashed into thinking that they need to apologize for things that they didn't even do, that were a part of a time that they had no responsibility for. They did not start slavery. This girl did not hold slaves. She did not, she's not a racist, presumably. I mean, it sounds to me like even though she's white, she doesn't really like white people. But presumably she's not a racist, so why is she apologizing for the actions of someone else?
I think it's a great question. And for me, it makes more sense. I certainly do not want to be responsible for anything my ancestors did. God knows that.
There were probably a bunch of conquistadors that, impaled their enemies. And
yes, I have family that comes from Spain, apparently. And, I can't even imagine what they must have done to the poor Native Americans when they got over here. And I'm certainly not going to apologize for it. I'm a product of that. I can't do anything about it.
Right, and I don't think you should. And I don't think any rational person would hold you responsible for what the conquistadors did. I live very close to St. Augustine, and I always go to this fort. I play some music out at this fort. It's the oldest fort in Florida. It was one of the first ones to be put there by the conquistadors. It's this amazing, big, beautiful rock. And every time I look at it, I think some Spanish conquistador is about to walk out of it and impale me. And it's just this awesome, amazing feeling, being surrounded by the oldest place in America. But I don't walk around to the next Latino person and or the next Spanish person and say, and look at them with terror in my eyes, thinking that they are going to impale me. That's just not how history, works. So, to me, it seems like it seems really, It seems out of line even, because, this person who was probably shipped in on some bus basically came into this community that they probably don't even live in and started telling everybody who lives there what to do and how to feel and what to think. And it's really, really unfortunate. What were some of the reactions from the anti-Antifa folks, the 3 rabid racists who were there in that day, you know, like the 3, not 3 million, everyone, like the left wants you to believe. 3. What were they? What happened when they started speaking?
Well, first, I will never impale you.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that. and I won't Jew you out, I promise.
Yes, thank you. That would be great. You know, I wish I would have heard more. You know, I did see something positive happen at the end.
Why didn't you hear more though? Were there?
Oh man, it was pretty unfortunate. You know, protests and rallies for me are the most basic building block of freedom of speech and letting the establishment know that things are not okay. And I think it's a really great American tradition. But it doesn't work if you're going to be as bad as the side that you're fighting against. You know, and if you hate someone for being intolerant and you don't tolerate their views, it's a zero-sum game.
Right.
You know, somebody's got to be the bigger person.
That's intolerant. It is. Being intolerant of intolerance is intolerance by definition. We've got a quick break coming up. We will be right back. You can get me at Shaq General. We will be right back with Mike Campina.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into the disgruntled millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. Of course, I am Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, patriarchy, and of course, you can't forget toxic masculinity. Now, we have been talking a little bit about Charleston. We've been talking a little bit about slavery, Jim Crow, the Confederate era, all the monuments that came up afterwards, and all the protests that came up even farther afterwards. And I wanted to tell you a little anecdote before we get back with my good friend Michael Campina, a photographer who was on ground zero of the recent Charleston rally. Ground zero, I say it like it's, 9/11 or something. Ground zero at 9/11. No, it was like 50 Antifa folks and about 3 white supremacists there. But talking about this reminds me of a little story that my second mother just told me. And for those of you who don't know, my father died of AIDS in 1988 from hemophilia-related AIDS, and my mom needed some help. She hired an au pair who eventually became like a second mother to me. Her name was Teresa Henderson, and she was this old, big, beautiful black lady who was the granddaughter of a free slave who lived through Jim Crow in Alabama. She told me a little story one time where she and her little sister were walking up to the water fountains. And of course, back then they had the white water fountains and the colored water fountains. And she told me, she said her big sister was very, very precocious and rambunctious. And she would always go up to the white water fountain when no one was looking to see if it tasted like sugar. Now, of course, people don't really want to acknowledge that, but, that gives me a little bit of black credibility. The fact that I was raised by a black woman, I know I don't sound like it, but I was raised by a black woman, and a black woman who actually went through something, not like all the black women who are raising kids today. I'm talking about a black woman who actually went through the kind of stuff that these white pseudo-intellectuals like to talk about and pontificate about and posture about, like this lady who Michael was telling us about earlier, who basically apologized for her grandmother's actions as, back in the day. And, look, I'm never going to apologize for something that I didn't do myself. That's just it. I'm never going to do it. I don't care whether it's future, present, or past. I'm not going to do it because that's a part of being an individual. That's a part of individual responsibility. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Michael Campina, because you are in the journalism business, the photography business. What was it like to see Antifa shutting down free speech? And did that give you a sort of inclination about which side was a little bit more interested in, peace, love, the American way, free speech, all that stuff? Like, do you think the right or the left is more interested in the basic fundamental aspects of what it means to be American?
I was disappointed. I was disappointed because generally it's the left that touts itself as being the party of compassion, empathy.
Right.
This idea of being intolerant to intolerance, I feel like it's a strategy that just will never win.
Right. It's a cop-out.
And it was, maybe I was a little bit more passionate in my 20s, but I'm in my mid-30s now, and really I enjoy hearing what people have to say, even if I'm sure I'm going to disagree, and I generally don't put myself there. I like to put myself in a place where when I meet people, no matter who they are, no matter how different they are from even my core beliefs, I like to imagine that I'm going to be amazed by the end of the conversation. And that's how I talk to everybody. When I meet somebody new and when I meet somebody who I presume I may not agree with, I also assume that they have an amazing story to tell me that I can never imagine and will change my view on the world just 1 degree more and make life that much more interesting.
Right.
And nobody really wants to hear these days what a secessionist party member has to say. But if he's not hurting anybody and he's not killing anybody, he's not breaking the law, when the mob mentality takes over and the guy can't even get a word out, it makes me worry for us. I don't want to sound like, hysterical myself, but, our founding fathers, I guess you could say, have specifically and strategically mapped out a system where you have to get uncomfortable with you have to be comfortable with uncomfortable truths. Right. In order to have a discourse. The whole entire country is based on compromise.
Right.
But if we just take on issues because it's vogue and because it's popular, and we let our emotions run wild, then we're no different than the countries that many people escape from to come here.
Exactly.
You know what I saw? I saw a lot of young people who had nothing to do on an afternoon. I saw disaffected youth. And to be honest with you, without trying to sound like really sensationalist, it reminded me of ISIS. It reminds me of young men who have just given up on the system and just need something to be angry about.
Well, it's because they're told in these universities and these schools that they have everything to be angry about, that nothing is their fault. It's all somebody else's fault. It's because of these other people who are engaging in their own rights and their own free speech, in the right to associate with one another, whether it be in a capitalist free market system or whether it be, just going out and discussing the monument situation. They believe that these people are the problems with the world, and that it is their speech, it is the things that they're saying that are causing all of these issues in the world. And honestly, it's really sad because a lot of these folks are young, impressionable, and they definitely want to do good in the world, but they're gotten to at a young enough point where they can be told that they're basically brainwashed to think that free speech is one of those things that's free speech can cause harm to certain minority communities. And it's honestly, listen, if there's a racist out there, I want him up front. I want him center. I want him front and center so we can get a good, strong whiff of the terrible person that he is. And so everyone knows who he is. Because if that person is proud enough, then they will stand out there without a mask on and say what it is that they believe, right? We are tuning into the disgruntled millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson radio show. You can get me at Shaq General on Twitter. You could also get me on Facebook, The Disgruntled Millennial. That's 2 L's, 2 N's in millennial. My name is Brett Siegel, subbing in for the great Kevin Jackson, who is going to be on Fox News Radio tonight, 6 to 9. That's a pretty primetime spot right there. Anyway, I am here with Michael Campina. We are going to bring him back into the next hour to have a longer, more in-depth discussion about Antifa. Get me at Shaq General. We'll be right back.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful four-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the Disgruntled Millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. My name is Brett Siegel, the Disgruntled Millennial, where I broadcast to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. And we have been here having a little chat with Michael Campina. He is a journalist, he is a photographer, and he actually found himself in ground zero of the one of these Confederate protests, and he was in the midst of all the hysteria. He was in the midst of it all. And, you know, we've been talking a little bit about free speech, about when is it appropriate to wear a mask, and when is it appropriate to get hysterical, and when is it appropriate to destroy your own city. Michael, let's talk a little bit about this.
On that note, because of that hysteria that we're talking about that I experienced, we started the conversation talking about my origins and my background and my experience growing up as a Latino, and how being a different shade of color in the same race was actually something enjoyable and something to laugh about, talk about, make fun of, create nicknames out of. Yesterday or a couple days ago, I don't know when it was, I'm an avid consumer of media, and I watch CNN frequently, and there was this small package they created. It was like this kind of like finger wagging. It's like, it said, don't say, if you said this, then you're probably wrong or something. I'm like, oh, great. Let's hear about what I shouldn't say anymore. So I clicked the video, and it was a bunch of people, Asian, Hispanic, Black, and they were saying that when people ask them where they're from, it's too much for them to handle. It's too much for them to handle.
It's a microaggression.
It's too much for them to handle. It's a disrespect on who they are as a person. Even though they are Taiwanese with Taiwanese parents, they're from Florida, and that should be the end of it. And every time somebody asks them that question, it's just like this mind-blowing experience, and it depresses them, and they get angry, and they were very snarky about it. And I just didn't understand that, because my whole entire life growing up in Miami, where are you from, was actually a really positive thing.
Yeah.
You know, where are you from exactly? Oh,
right.
My people are from there too. Oh, you're from there. You don't look like it. And it's an icebreaker. It's a way to get closer to people, to understand their lineage, to create some kind of common ground.
Yes.
I was always enthusiastic about answering where I'm from because nobody could guess. Most people think I'm a New York Jew, you know, and I'm a Miami Colombian. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's a fun conversation, and it creates, you know, warmth. My experience, you know, one of my best friends in Miami, Mikey Lugo, he's a production manager at New Times, advertising genius artist. His parents one is Puerto Rican, the other one is Cuban. Historically, these two island nations, as similar as they are, they hate each other, but yet he's a product of a Puerto Rican and a Cuban's love. And still, we laugh about how much Puerto Ricans and Cubans don't get along, and I hang out with somebody who's a product of the complete opposite of that, and it's just an enjoyable thing to kind of kick around intellectually. If somebody asks me where I'm from, I get excited. I don't understand this hysteria.
Right.
You know, I don't get it. You know, like, where are you from means that I'm trying to, like, you know.
You're assuming that they're not from here. It's a microaggression. And you know what? This is one of the things, but this is why the three people on the right could sit there and listen to the Antifa folks talk, but the freaking 50 people on the left couldn't sit there and listen to the three people who are on the right side talk. They couldn't even sit there and listen to them. This is why. This is why. It's because of the microaggression culture. This is exactly why. The microaggression culture basically says that you have to basically change your language in order to quell someone else's racial sensibilities or whatever, someone else's racial discomforts, you know, because listen, you and I don't assume that because someone isn't from here that they should feel uncomfortable, right? That's them assuming it. That's that person who is, quote unquote, not from here, who is having that feeling. It's not something that you're doing. You're not making them feel uncomfortable. They are making themselves feel uncomfortable.
I'm just curious. You know, I'm a curious person. I defy all racial, you know, kind of norms, and I enjoy telling my story. And I just don't see it as a hateful thing to ask a basic question of, like, it's like akin to being hateful about where do you work, right? You know, like, you know, it's a very simple answer. You know,
yeah. Well, maybe some people are not proud of where they work, and just like some people are maybe not proud of where they're from. You know, if I were from Syria, if I were from some hellhole in Syria, I don't know if I would be proud of that. You know, if I were raped as a child because some Islamic creep tried to, like, pretend that I was you know, like, if I just the crazy, disgusting things that go on over there. If I were from there, I wouldn't necessarily be proud of it. I think the movement to try to, like, make people try, you know, to the movement, this cultural relativism that makes people say, oh, well, you should be proud of where you're from no matter where you're from. Even if the most awful, terrible things go on there, just like you said, the boats are moving this way. The boats aren't moving that way. The question that you get when you get here is, where are you from? It's not, show me your information. I'm going to hit you if you're not from here. I'm going to hurt you if you're not from here. Get out of here if you're not from here. The question is, where are you from? But this is the thing. Microaggression culture, leftists are so weak that they don't even understand how strong this country is. They don't even understand how that's a good question, how that's a nice question compared to other places where you might.
It's a great question.
Where you might encounter
so many realizations.
Right. When you might, in other places, if you were to encounter a stranger, there would be a much different reaction than here in America. If the worst thing that happens in your day is someone asks you, where are you from? Then you have it so good that you can't, it's like you don't even know how good you have it. You have it so good that you are completely immune to the idea of not having it, of having it worse.
Do you know
That's how good you have it.
Do you know how much trouble I would get into if every time I travel to a foreign country, if I'm in France or when I've gone to Spain, and they ask me, where are you from, and I have an attitude with them? It would be absurd. It would be absurd.
And then you might say, well, my ancestry, I'm from right here. I'm from right here.
Yeah, and and truthfully, I mean, because I buck all of those social norms. And so even when they find out I'm from the United States, they're okay. Like, and so what state? And then what city? And then where are your parents from? And that's just how people communicate. That's how we get to know each other. It's not hatred.
Yeah.
You know?
With that in mind, Michael Campina, photographer extraordinaire. I'm going to cut this off, and we're going to go to some commercials for our sponsors. We're going to do this again one day, man. As things progress, I want to make sure you keep in touch with me. I want to make sure everyone keeps in touch with Mike. We're going to put his website below. It's michaelcampinaphotographs.com, right?
michaelcampina.com. But who cares? Whatever.
michaelcampina.com. That's CAMPINA.com. Michael, thank you so much for joining the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. Of course, I am the disgruntled millennial broadcasting to you not live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, free from your bigotry, racism, white supremacy, all that good stuff. I want to thank you again. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the disgruntled millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. I am subbing in for the great Kevin Jackson. This is Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial. You can get me at Shaq General on Twitter, at Shaq General on Twitter. I always broadcast to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, your nasty bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, patriarchy, and of course, toxic masculinity. One of the things I want to talk about today is, well, BuzzFeed has sort of become synonymous with leftist propaganda. They use their medium, of course, to promote these ideas of social justice, which they think are going to make the world a better place, but ultimately it just makes the world that much more confusing. For example, they are clearly a part of this intersectional feminist movement, which basically it has divided people in terms of their identifications. Are you a cisgendered person? Are you a white person or a black person? Are you a male? Are you a female? And depending on where you land up, you get a certain amount of privilege points. So one of the things that BuzzFeed just loves to do is to sort of tout the whole race card. Okay, they want to talk about white racism, and racism is such a, institutional racism, while simultaneously engaging in some of the worst kind of racism that I've ever seen. They put out a video called White, and it was about all these people of color who were basically asked the question, what do you think of when you hear the word white? And it was just a bunch of people going, I hear nastiness, I think of terribleness, I think of power, I think of racism. And it just goes to show you how brainwashed all of these people are. Now, they've released a video recently called 24 Questions Black People Have for White People. Now, you're in luck, because I happen to be a white people. And I am going to answer some of these questions, these life-changing, profound questions that black people have for white people. Far be it from me to let these important questions go unanswered. All right, let's hear it.
Why do you always make such horrible decisions in horror movies? It's not cool to split up.
Why do we make such horrible decisions in movies? Okay, let me explain this to you, SJW. There are these things called writers and directors and scripts. When you see someone in a horror movie, I know this is tough. Follow me. Pay attention. I know this is tough. When you see someone in a movie, it's not really real. They're not really running. And chances are, whatever color the person is who is running away, who is making that bad decision during a movie, chances are they had a writer. They didn't think of it themselves. What a stupid, stupid question.
Why do you freak out when black people are cast to play white fictional characters?
I don't know. I don't really have a problem with it, but ask yourself this. Would you have a problem if there was a Shaft remake with Benedict Cumberbatch as the lead? I don't have a problem with it. I thought the whole Hamilton thing was kind of funny. that Hamilton was played by a black guy. Of course, to me, that was really just an attempt of the left to sort of troll the right. Oh, we're going to historically misrepresent one of their heroes, one of their great heroes, Hamilton. And, I personally, I don't even care. I don't care. I mean, there is a part of me that says, I don't know why you need to make old heroes into these new social justice heroes. Why don't you just create your own new heroes? Why do you have to mess with James Bond? Why do you have to mess with Ghostbusters? I say keep it up. Eventually, people are going to catch on that you're just trying to promote this social justice warrior agenda.
What's the big deal if Idris Elba plays James Bond?
There is no big deal with Idris Elba playing James Bond. In fact, I actually stand with the social justice warriors on this. Unfortunately, the same social justice warriors want to make a female Bond. Now, can you imagine a female Bond? Idris Elba has a lot more in common with James Bond than any female that you could possibly put in Jane Bond's role, or whatever they would call her.
Go see it twice.
Why is a big butt and big lips considered attractive on a white woman, but they're unattractive on a black woman?
Okay, first of all, who told you that? Who told you that? That's absolutely ridiculous. And also, second of all, what happened to the individual? What happened to individuals being attractive or unattractive? Just like, I mean, this goes to show you the left, they're just everything. There's nothing spiritual about this question whatsoever. All it is just, why big butts and big lips? Like, yes, you know what? There are anthropological reasons why big butt and big lips are attractive to men. They show fertility. They show that a woman can hold a baby in their womb. Reducing this down to race, I think, just shows more sour grapes on the part of the person who asked the question. Maybe her lips and butt aren't like the greatest, okay? Maybe they're big and thick, but they're not the greatest, okay? Maybe her boyfriend left her for a white girl with big lips and big hips. And whatever happened to the individual, right? The premise of the question is based on the idea that we're all just walking lips and hips. No context, no like pretty face or, great spirit or really smart and intelligent. None of that stuff. This girl just thinks, she's got big lips, check. She's got big hips, check. She's white, check. And who cares what other people find attractive? Find yourself someone that you like. Find yourself someone that likes you for who you are, not for your lips, not for your hips, for who you are as a person. And get on with your life and stop worrying about everybody else. Stop worrying about what other people find attractive. It's just sour grapes.
Do y'all really think Miley is the one who created twerking? Really?
Why am I supposed to teach you how to twerk? I don't know how to twerk.
Okay, since these questions are sort of framed as though all white people get together in a big room and decide how we're going to accost minorities, that we all think the same exact thing. Isn't this the kind of racist attitude that they are trying to prevent and they're trying to stop? But to answer the question, I don't care about some stupid, slutty dance. Like, you think I care if Miley's... Like, it's no achievement to have created the twerk. All it is body movements like a baboon, basically. Just like a mating call. And what's really disturbing is I went to a school sort of in the ghetto when I was a kid, and too many people were twerking. At like second grade, third grade. I mean, I presume it has to do with the left always trying to sexualize children. But, I mean, let's face it. Like, who cares about twerking? And who cares about Miley Cyrus either? News flashed. Most of us have better things to do than think about twerking all day long and who created it. I can't believe this is the kind of profound, insightful questions that BuzzFeed chose to put out there. Black people asking white people questions.
Why is it that white people always act as though they have discovered a new trend when people of color have been doing it for virtually years?
Okay, of course, they're talking about Columbusing. We spoke about that a few weeks ago here on the Kevin Jackson radio show. I was subbing in for the great Kevin Jackson, of course. We spoke about Columbusing, which is the idea that when we say that Columbus discovered America, well, the leftists want to say, well, no, actually, there were Native Americans here. Nobody really discovered anything. So that's what they mean when they say you're Columbusing. It's like if a white guy says, I found this new, tavern somewhere, and it's like the black guys have been going there forever. He Columbused it. That's like a rude thing to do. To be like, hey, I found this new bar. Could you imagine having a group of friends who, when you said, hey, I found this new bar, we should go. If every single time something like that happened, they were like, well, actually, you didn't discover it. And it's super offensive that you said that you found it. You didn't find anything. It's been there all along. And you're just appropriating someone else's discovery. So stupid. How about this for cultural appropriation and Columbusing, okay? How about, since a white guy invented the car, all people of color put away your cars. Stop driving. How about that? How about, since a white guy discovered how to generate electricity, you stop using electricity because you're Columbusing that. You didn't discover it. It's appropriation. Put your money where your mouth is, leftists. I guarantee you, the day you put your money where your mouth is the day that a lot of you start to die. I dare you. I dare you to go one day without any inventions made by white people, cisgendered white people. I dare you. I double dog dare you.
Why is it when a black woman wears her hair natural, it's seen as inappropriate, but when a white woman does, it's praised?
Who are you talking to? Who are you talking about? No one sees it as a bad thing to wear your hair natural. That is your own insecurities. That is your own insecurities that you are projecting onto white people, onto an entire race.
This is the hair that I was born with, so you wearing it as a trend is not cute.
Okay, there we go with the cultural appropriation stuff, okay? Like I said before, just a second ago, if it's not cute for someone to wear a hairstyle that you think is a black hairstyle, then don't do anything that is white. Don't do anything that is white. Don't read English. Don't use electricity. Don't drive a car. Don't fly an airplane. Don't use a computer. Don't use your phone. Don't use your AC. Well, you can't use your AC without electricity. All inventions made by white people. And if you want to truly stick it to the man, if you truly want to stick it to the man, then boycott white people. Truly boycott white people. We will be right back.
Kevin Jackson on the Black Sphere Radio Network.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. Of course, I'm your host, Brett Siegel, for the day. Kevin Jackson is going to be on the radio tonight in New York, Fox News Radio. It's going to be really, really awesome. He did a killer job last night on Tuesday. Today is Wednesday. He's going to be killing it tonight at 6 o'clock, taking the liberals to school. It's going to be awesome. Now, we were just answering questions. Well, I was answering questions because I took it upon myself to answer questions posed to white people by black people. And since all black people represent each other and all white people represent each other, why not declare myself the spokesman of all white people? So on behalf of all white people, I answer these questions from all black people.
Like, can you appropriate my student loans? Can you take that off my hands?
No, I can't appropriate your student loans. And what the hell is that supposed to mean anyway? What, since we appropriate your culture and since we have white supremacy and since I'm supposed to have white guilt and have all this white privilege, that I'm just supposed to pay for your student loan? Okay, let's go tit for tat. Let's see who is appropriating whose culture more. You are over here worried about twerking and haircuts and lips and hips. Over here, we are building Western civilization. Could you imagine if every white person was to get upset at a minority or someone, a person of color, a black person, a Hispanic person? Could you imagine if a white person got upset every single time someone from a different culture or a different race appropriated white culture, appropriated white goods, appropriated white inventions? I mean, thankfully, I don't see these people as being white men who created things. I see them as being men who created things, men who did things, people who did things. Did they happen to be white? Yes. Did they happen to be men? Yes. Is that indicative of some grand racist scheme? Not a chance. In fact, the racism going on here is against white people. Imagine the reverse. Imagine a white person asking a black person this same thing, like, these same kinds of questions. Okay, we created Western civilization. When are you going to appropriate my house chores? The least you could do is my dishes. Since you appropriated Western civilization, you drive around in that car, you use that phone. Obviously, these people of color, these brown people, were sitting in a studio using a lot of inventions created by white people. When do we talk about that? I personally don't want to talk about that, because I think the more the merrier. The more people around the world join Western civilization, the more people around the world that get electricity and running water and AC and food on demand and cars that take you from A to B in no time, airplanes, all the cool things that were created by cisgendered white men. I want everyone to enjoy these things. And you're whining about someone enjoying a haircut? And twerking, a stupid dance that's like a mating call. That's what you're worried about? Give me a break.
Why is it that white crime is seen as an isolated incident, but black crime is a representation of my entire community?
When we see a story on TV about a white serial killer, I don't automatically assume that all white people must be serial killers too.
Number one, I don't assume that all black people commit crime or that it's a referendum on the entire community. Two, statistics are not irrelevant. And this is just your way of brushing under the rug the crime in the black community. What you're talking about is racists. What I'm talking about is statistics. And using statistics to arm you with reality. Now, maybe instead of getting upset at other people for acknowledging statistics, why don't you work to make things better in your community? Instead of blaming other people and projecting your problems onto Whitey, onto scary, scary Whitey. Most people are completely colorblind and don't even see race and don't care. Most people care about the content of your character, not the color of your skin. Believe it or not, I know you're dying to think that you're this victim, that everybody hates you and that you have it so awful in this country. But that's just not the case. And I feel sorry for these people that they live like this. It's like they're just scared and angry.
Why does talking about race make you feel so uncomfortable?
Is it because you think that you'll be perceived as racist if you talk about race?
Okay, me personally, I am not uncomfortable talking about race at all. Thanks to years and years of being called a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, transphobe, just because I want voters to show an ID at the booth, because I support our cops, because I support gun rights, because I support freedom and capitalism and free markets. It's for these reasons that I've been called a bigot, racist, sexist, homophobe. After a long time of trying to talk reason into leftists, I just gave up. Once you've decided that the other side is just evil to the core because of the color of their skin, once you've decided that the other side is evil, nothing that they say will satisfy you. Most people have empathy. Most people want to be sensitive to your feelings. People don't want to just hurt your feelings. And the people that are like that, I'm sure it has nothing to do with race. But no matter how sensitive I was, no matter how diplomatic I was, in the end, it was still the same. Racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe. Because I believed in things in which race was completely irrelevant. Voting ID cards. Not only black people have to show ID cards, all people have to show ID cards. It's race neutral. Because I believe in these race neutral things. Capitalism is the most race neutral system of economics that has ever been created. But to these leftist SJWs, capitalism is equal to racism, sexism, bigotry, homophobia. So after years of being pinned as a bigot, racist, sexist, homophobe, talking about race is way easier. It's way easier to be honest when you know that you're never going to satisfy the other side. It's easier to be honest with yourself, too.
You don't really believe that racism is over because we have a black president, do you?
Okay. Nobody thinks that racism is over. Racism is like jealousy. It will always be here. You are in for an uphill battle if that is your goal. If you are trying to rid the world of jealousy and racism and biases and just negative I'm going to rid the world of negativity, like that's what trying to rid the world of racism is like. It's trying to rid the world of frailty. It's just never going to happen. What you mean is institutional racism. And yes, I do believe that institutional racism is gone. The only institutional racism that you see now is against Asians and white folks.
Why is it so easy for you to notice when there are no white people around, but you hardly ever notice when there are no black people around?
Are you aware of how this human being thing works? You have your body. I have my body. When I'm in a room with you, you have no idea what I'm aware of. If I'm in a room with a bunch of white people, you don't know what I'm aware of. You don't know what I'm taking note of. I do believe that some people, regardless of race, go throughout life without taking much of it in. That's sad. Me, I take a lot of it in. That's great. I think of that as a good thing. And I don't sit there and think to myself, well, oh my God, I'm the only white guy in this room. Like I said, I grew up in a place where I was a minority, okay? There were tons of black people in the room, and I didn't even notice it at all, okay? I was raised by a black woman. Go figure that. All in all, since I am all white people and I'm talking to all black people, get out of your head. Just get out of your head. You're thinking way too much into this. The white people in the room are not out to get you. They're not sitting there thinking, oh my God, there's a black person nearby. That's not what they're thinking. That's you. Those are your own neuroses. Those are your own insecurities. That is your own having been brainwashed. Don't project that onto me. Okay, well, I'm a little sick and tired of answering these questions. It's basically all the same thing. You could sum this whole video up into one big question. Why are white people so terrible? Why are all white people so terrible? I mean, just the wording of the question is totally racist. Why don't I reverse it for a moment? How about that? We'll play a little thought experiment. You tell me how this sounds. All right, black people, on behalf of all white people, I want to ask you some questions. Why are you killing each other on the street? Why are you doing drugs and joining gangs? Why are you killing your babies in record numbers? Why are you on welfare? Black women, why do you drive your men out of the home? If you're so offended by the N-word, why do you glorify artists who incessantly use the N-word? Why do you appropriate our white technology? Why do you appropriate our white inventions? God, I can't even say it without feeling weird and uncomfortable. That feels weird and uncomfortable. Why white inventions? White haircut, black haircut, black culture. It feels nasty coming off of my tongue. It feels weird because ultimately I'm an individualist. I care about the individual. I don't care what race you are in. And it's clear that BuzzFeed doesn't feel the same way. I don't know how they don't have a disgusting taste on their tongue after putting that video out.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. Of course, I am guest hosting for the great Kevin Jackson while he is out in New York doing Fox News Radio tonight. It's going to be an awesome show. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. You might even hear me call in. It's going to be a really awesome show. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is Trump's mental condition. We've heard about it. We've heard about Trump's mental condition, his problems, his mental problems. Trump is crazy, right? He's an insane person. No, he's a cold, calculating, evil genius who wants to destroy America, who wants to annihilate human life on Earth for his own personal gain, however that works. But he's insane. He's mentally deficient. Which is it, folks? Is he an evil mastermind genius, or is he insane? That's the new talking point. Trump is just crazy. He is unfit, not because of his policy, but because he's mentally defunct. He is just crazy.
The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability, nor some of the competence that he needs to demonstrate in order to be successful.
Well, there's actually a growing mountain of evidence that the president has been very erratic, has shown a mental instability.
By a man who obviously is mentally unstable. I mean, I'm not joking about it or being a smartass. This is a man who is not well. This is a man who is not qualified or mentally or morally fit to be the president of the United States.
Well, I certainly think that there's an issue with the president's capability. There's some attribute of his character that makes him seemingly incapable of introspection and a broad understanding of what the country really needs. And I think it's a question that people are asking. What is going on with this president? What could explain this kind of behavior?
And especially among Republicans in Congress, they have been raising the very question of his stability and his mental fitness to be president of the United States.
And now we're seeing that we're getting the ramifications as a nation of what having a sick man in the White House means. He's not mentally stable.
Isn't it fun watching the left implode like this? Isn't it fun watching the rhinos go nuts? I mean, not so much the rhinos. I wish the rhinos would not be rhinos and actually abide by the promises that they made to their constituents when running for office, but that is neither here nor there at this point. The point is that everyone is now a psychologist. Everyone knows about they're self-described psychologists giving psychological advice about the president as if they experienced intensive therapy sessions with the president, where the president displayed all of this behavior, this crazy, crazy behavior. When did they get their degrees in psychology? When did they get their doctorates? They have really tried to throw everything except the kitchen sink at this guy, and nothing sticks. They call him a racist. I mean, he's clearly not a racist. They call him an anti-Semite. What anti-Semite stands in front of the Western Wall with a yarmulke on praying? He must be in hiding. It must be like a Islamic taqiyya or something when he lies. He's lying to all of us. He's not really pro-Israel. He's not a sexist. He's got women working at top positions in his companies. His daughter is a very powerful woman. They tried to throw the Russia stuff at him. That didn't stick. Not one shred of evidence. I mean, you would think that for all of the Trump-Russia coverage, that he would be knee-deep, that it would be easy to prove. But no, it wasn't easy to prove. He's an evil racist. He's a sexist. He's a homophobe. He's a transphobe. Now, since the usual leftists' attack didn't stick, never stuck, never will stick, they had to think outside the box. So they started calling him Hitler. He is Hitler. Trump is Hitler. Trump represents Nazism and white nationalism and white supremacy. And then Trump wholesale renounced the white supremacists. Ignored by the media. Totally ignored. So they went on to their next tack. Trump is insane. He's mentally insane. He's not a careful, calculating, cold, ruthless, genius, evil mastermind. No, everything that he's doing is absolutely insane. It's far be it from me to tell my enemies when they're doing something wrong, but this is really going to come back to bite you in the butts, libs. Aren't you the ones always touting that people who are mentally defunct, people who are disabled in any way, should not be shamed? I mean, if you really cared about the guy, if you really cared about the president, you wouldn't shame him for his mental illness. You wouldn't want to engage in ableism, now would you? Now, what's funny about this is that the proof that these alleged psychiatrists, psychologists have that Donald Trump is crazy is exactly the same evidence that we all have. Because none of these people sat down in a therapy session with him. None of these people actually, used their integrity as medical professionals to actually figure out what's actually going on with the guy. They're using the same things as we are. The videos, the rallies, articles on various news sites. That is how these psychologists are deducing that Donald Trump is a crazy person. And of course, CNN puts it out there like it's news. I swear, they are so immoral. They are so gross. CNN, you make me sick. You know who else makes me sick? Salon.com. Salon.com just released an article a few days ago. Psychiatrist Bandy Lee, we have an obligation to speak about Donald Trump's mental health issues. Our survival as a species may be at stake. Jesus, you're really going for the throat, aren't you? You're really going for the jugular. Our survival as an entire species? Did you steal that one right out of the environmentalist playbook? Our survival as a species may be at stake. Malignant reality is taking hold in American politics, says a shrink who held a conference on Trump's mental health. She held a conference on Trump's mental health. Only person who wasn't there was Donald Trump himself. This is what it reads. It starts out, I mean, I can't believe some people call this journalism. I can't believe some people even call this news. It reads, Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to the United States and the world. He has reckless disregard for democracy and its foundational principles. Yeah, like you guys care about foundational principles. Trump is also an authoritarian plutocrat who appears to be using the presidency as a means to enrich himself and his closest allies, as well as family members. Trump's proposed 2018 federal budget is a shockingly cruel document that threatens to destroy America's already threadbare social safety net in order to give the rich and powerful even more hefty tax cuts. We're going to talk a little bit about this more when we get back. I'm the disgruntled millennial. Get me at Shaq General. We'll be right back.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful four-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Salon.com, the leftist, the extreme far left hack news site. It's not news. It's just left-wing propaganda, and really crappy left-wing propaganda, to be honest. You'd think they'd be a little bit less transparent, but no. Salon.com is like, hey, everybody, we're here to brainwash you. So here's an article, a little bit more from the article that I was reading just a minute ago about Donald Trump's mental health. It says, Donald Trump's failures as a president have been compounded by his unstable personality and behavior. It has been reported by staffers inside the Trump White House that he is prone to extreme mood swings, is cantankerous and unpredictable, flies into blind rages when he does not get his way, is highly suggestible and readily manipulated, becomes bored easily and fails to complete tasks, is confused by basic policy matters, and is even unhappy and lonely. And despite the bragging about his strength and vitality during the 2016 presidential campaign, Trump appears to tire easy and easily succumbs to exhaustion. These people are not even paying attention. Trump is all over the place. Trump is not tired. He may be a lot of things, but he's not tired. And then they go on to interview Dr. Bandy Lee, a psychiatrist at Yale University who specializes in public health and violence prevention. She recently convened a conference that explored issues that related to Donald Trump's emotional health and how mental health professionals should respond to this crisis. It's a crisis. Donald Trump's mental health is a crisis. We're going to examine his mental health in a meeting where we get a whole bunch of us together and we all talk about his mental health. None of us have ever met him. None of us have ever sat in a room with him. None of us have ever treated him or given him any kind of therapy, but we're all going to analyze. We're going to psychoanalyze the president without him even being here. That's how good at our jobs we are. That's how amazing. That's what good people we are. We're not being negligent. We're not violating any medical ethics or anything like that. We just care about the country. It's a crisis, don't you see? Dr. Bandy Lee, when asked, how did a person like Donald Trump become president? You can really see all you need to know about this lady and probably how she practices psychology by her answer. She says, me being a psychiatrist, I will inevitably see things from that lens. I also tend to think about the social context that gives rise to current conditions. For me, the big shift in our society has been the increasing inequality. And with that, a certain segment of the population will end up suffering from an undue amount of poverty. A relative poverty, actually, deprivation, a lack of education, a lack of health care, and mental health care. All those will contribute to a worsening of collective mental health. That's why Donald Trump became president. We're all mentally ill. Not only is she trying to psychoanalyze the president, she's trying to psychoanalyze every single person who voted for him. Now, clearly, this woman is a leftist hack. I swear, I wonder how she carries on her therapy sessions. Some little kid comes in and she's like, I've been bullied. I have these feelings. I don't know. I think I might be gay. I might be a female. I don't know. All my friends are saying that they're trans and I don't know. This is the kind of doctor that would probably go, yes, of course. They'd stroke you on the head and they'd say, of course you're yes, you're transgendered. Of course you are. If she had a black patient, she probably came in there, oh, people are bullying me. People are bullying me. People aren't nice to me. I don't know what it is. She might say, oh, well, clearly you are being bullied because you are black. Clearly you are being bullied because you are disabled. Clearly all of your problems are because of other people. That's not psychology. I mean, that is psychology. You psychologically screw people up like that. Mark my words. There's going to be a rise in social justice warrior psychology. Because what are all these Antifa people going to do when they realize that they can't get a job and they have to move out of mom's basement eventually? What are they going to do? They don't have any marketable skills other than social justice activism and community organizing. And when they grow up and they become old and lonely and bitter and angry, they are going to wonder what it is that is wrong with them. And they are going to see a psychiatrist. And that psychiatrist, if her name is Dr. Bandy Lee, she is going to probably tell them that, oh, you did everything right. Oh, you just feel good about yourself. Here's a participation trophy. Here's some participation kudos. Just because you're here, yes, everyone deserves to feel good. Oh, you wasted your life? That's someone else's fault. Oh, you made a lot of poor decisions? That's someone else's fault. She even goes so far as to say, the situation has come to such a critical level. In fact, a state of emergency exists and we could no longer hold back. She's talking about her and her friends who started this conference about Donald Trump's mental health, of course, without Donald Trump even being there. This is such a violation of medical ethics. I can't believe these people still have licenses. Here's another psychiatry hack who is talking about a patient that she's never seen before.
I'm Dr. Gail Saltz. Where in the DSM do I turn to find this?
The DSM is a list of mental disorders, just in case you don't know.
Well, let me first say, I cannot diagnose Donald Trump. I don't know Donald Trump, but I would say that someone who spends time creating a very grandiose view of themselves, I'm the best in business, I'm sexually the best, all the women want me, and will break the rules, lie, do something unethical for the purpose of that, it certainly makes you think about intense narcissism, right? Everything has to refer to me, and I have to be the best.
I'm not going to diagnose him, but hang on a sec. Let me just diagnose him. And who doesn't want to be the best? Why is wanting to be the best a bad thing? Why is that a mental illness to you? Narcissism? That's something you want to figure out clinically, not based on some speeches and some policy prescriptions that you might not like. And she provides no examples whatsoever. She just expects you to know what she's talking about.
Interestingly, if you look at past presidents, great presidents who were ranked as the greatest, being grandiose or being very, very confident in believing in your skills actually correlates with greatness in presidents. However, when it also moved into being incredibly self-centered, in other words, no empathy, everything has to refer to me, I always have to be at the center and it has to be about me, that did not correlate with greatness. So the question is, where does it fall out there? Tells you a lot about what would make a great leader, let's say.
She says Donald Trump has no empathy. How do you know that? How do you know that the president lacks empathy? Don't you have to actually sit in a therapy session to figure that one out? How can you tell? I mean, clearly Trump has empathy for the most defenseless among us. I mean, he redistributed Title X money that was going to Planned Parenthood away from Planned Parenthood. He moved it to places who actually plan to be parents. He has a lot of empathy for our veterans. He's making it easier for them to be trained, easier for them to get jobs, easier for them to get medical care. He obviously cares about inner city children. He appointed Betsy DeVos. She's a big proponent of school choice. You know, that thing that teachers hate because then they actually have to work for their positions instead of handing out a bunch of participation trophies and calling it a day? No, he lacks empathy because he's not a social justice warrior like you are. Where did you get your doctorate from? Hogwarts? If Trump were the exact same person, had the exact same demeanor, exact same mentality, except he was promoting leftist principles, leftist anti-ideologies, I guarantee you this person would come out there and say, oh, he's absolutely mentally capable. He's totally okay to be president. I swear they should round up all the people at this conference on Trump's mental health and take away all of their licenses to practice. These people need shrinks. They don't need to be shrinks.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the Disgruntled Millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. Of course, I am Brett Siegel, the Disgruntled Millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. And we were just talking about Donald Trump's mental health. Dr. Bandy Lee, a Yale psychiatrist, has basically come out, put her reputation and her career on the line by basically holding a conference in which she gathered a whole bunch of other psychiatrists who are holding their careers on the line, apparently, and basically all decided to collectively that Donald Trump is an insane person. Of course, they all met with him and, did intensive therapy sessions. And of course, they arrive at this conclusion after some careful experiments. They tested his brain scans. They did MRIs and EEGs, and they got all the best. No, they didn't do any of that stuff. A bunch of folks, a bunch of hack leftist psychiatrists who probably have made careers out of screwing up their patients got together to have a big circle wank in a conference where they basically talked about how awful Donald Trump is and how awful half of America is. Not only is Donald Trump insane, but half of America is insane. when asked by Salon.com, what are the 2 or 3 things that you could cite about Donald Trump's behavior that causes you the greatest concern, worry, or alarm? Dr. Bandy Lee goes, there are certainly the symptoms that he displays. He has a great need for adulation. He is angry if reality does not meet his needs. People have been expecting him to settle into his role and become more presidential. But that does not ordinarily happen among those with such personality traits. In fact, what we were seeing here is a creation of his own reality, a reality that will meet Trump's own emotional needs and the needs to impose that reality on others. It is his imperviousness to facts and reality that could place us all at great risk. And who are the fearmongers, folks? Are the conservatives really the fearmongers? Oh, Islamophobia. Oh, they're just afraid of Muslims. They're afraid of Islam. No, they're chopping people's heads off and raping women and have no concern for women's rights or human rights. There's 61 Muslim countries, like 4 of them are decent, sort of civilized. But no, we're fearmongers. But this lady, one psychiatrist, gets together with a few other psychiatrists, looks at a couple YouTube videos of Donald Trump because they never even met the guy, and then they decide that he is mentally defunct. They decide that he's mentally impaired. And they base this on their experience as doctors. Dr. Bandy Lee, of course, she is the ringleader of this circus. When she was asked, on one hand, he can just be cantankerous and moody and angry, spoiled child, right? I mean, I've described him as a man-child or a clown king, but how do we separate that from saying, okay, there's something going on clinically? That's a great question. How do we know if there's something going on clinically? And she says, one does not make the other mutually exclusive. In fact, one can both be immature and a jerk, dangerous and ill-intentioned. In other words, bad as well as mad. This answers the question I had asked earlier. Well, wasn't he he was, just 2 days ago, he was an evil genius mastermind, and now he's just an incompetent, crazy person. I guess she answered that question. She said it's really the combination that makes it so toxic and unpredictable that we felt that there was a need to speak out. The interviewer says, how should the Goldwater rule, the ethical requirement not to diagnose a person you have not examined, be balanced with mental health professionals' responsibilities as American citizens and members of the global community? Wow. Did you hear how loaded that question is? How should the Goldwater rule, the ethical requirement to not diagnose a person you have not examined, be balanced with the mental health professionals' responsibilities as American citizens? Okay, that's a great question. A little bit loaded, if you ask me. I mean, I don't think that mental health professionals have a responsibility to the global community. They have a responsibility to their patients. They have a responsibility to the people whom they treat. And Dr. Bandy Lee answers that loaded question saying what we all might think she would say. She said, in an ordinary situation where matters were not so intense, we could balance out our political activism and separate that from our professional goals and actions. But when there is such a grave mental disability, how do you know it's a grave mental disability? You haven't seen him. She says, when there is such a grave mental disability that it's affecting the public sphere, the political sphere, such as in the current position of power, then those lines get blurred. Given that all human health exists in an ecological system, there is no rule that politics will never enter the sphere of health or the mental health profession. Right now, we're seeing that it does. All right, listen to her words. Human health exists in an ecological system. First of all, that's very collectivist. When I eat, you don't get full. When you eat, I don't get full. That's because we're individuals. My health is independent from your health. Now, she obviously acknowledges that the Goldwater rule has some value, the ethical requirement that requires you not to diagnose a person if you have not examined them. No! Donald Trump's mental health issues are so blaring, so out there, so in the public sphere, and Dr. Bandy Lee is such a good psychiatrist that she doesn't have to acknowledge the Goldwater rule because the problem is so dire. It is such a dire situation that she is going to go outside of her realm as a doctor and diagnose someone that she's never even examined in her life. Probably never even sat in a room with the guy. What's her rationale? She says, we have a president who asks, what's the point of having nuclear weapons if we cannot use them? Who urges the government to use torture or worse against prisoners? Who urges his followers at political rallies to beat protesters up so badly that they'll be taken out in stretchers, and suggests that his followers could always assassinate Hillary Clinton if she were to be elected. There is something very wrong here. I agree there's something very wrong here. What's very wrong here is that none of that is true. Other than the part that he asked, what's the point of having nuclear weapons if we cannot use them? And I agree. It's a good question. Nuclear weapons should be on the table. It's what you call a deterrent. If you tell your kid that you're never, ever going to spank them, no matter what they do, you are going to have a kid who misbehaves. Saying that it is possible, saying that it is within the realm of possibilities to use nuclear weapons is not the same as declaring war on a country and lobbing a nuclear weapon over there and obliterating an entire society. Otherwise, all the other stuff she said is not true. It's all lies. But you know what? This whole clinically diagnosing random people who you've never diagnosed, that sounds fun. I want to try it. Why shouldn't we all try it? Next time you see a person you don't like, just say that they're mentally ill. Just say that they're crazy. Why can't I? Why can't I diagnose the president? Why can't I diagnose whoever I want to? This lady is diagnosing the president on practically nothing. I mean, I could diagnose anyone I see on TV. I could diagnose a celebrity, right? I could diagnose Tom Cruise with having narcissist personality or some sort of personality disorder, right? Doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it ethical, and it doesn't mean that this lady shouldn't lose her license. Of course, Salon is treating her like this brave, outspoken person. She's so brave for coming out and using her superpower psychological skills to diagnose the president of the United States when she hasn't even seen him. That's a real skill, right? And the sycophants over at Salon.com said, why do you think more of your peers haven't spoken out about these concerns? Are they afraid of professional consequences, personal threats of violence? And she says, one of my colleagues said this was not the way she wished to spend her life. In other words, to spend the rest of her life paying for an expression of her opinion by fighting lawsuits, by fighting for her license. There was a fear of having her license taken away. Yes, the fear was present then, and it is still present now, as it should be. Yes. There's a reason why you're not supposed to diagnose people who you haven't seen yet, because it's impossible. And this is the kind of doctor that CNN likes to tout. This is the kind of doctor that Salon, those left-wing hatchet pieces, those left-wing hatchet sites, they're trying to convince you that it's real news, that you're actually getting information, that you are getting some semblance of truth. It's not truth. I know all of us has one of these. We all have one of those friends, one of those exaggerators, right? One of those people who exaggerates so much little things become catastrophic. Oh my God, I got cut off at the grocery store today, and this guy pulled out the window and blah, 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 blah. And it was this big, awful thing, and I felt so triggered, and it was just this awful, terrible thing, when really it was just some guy looked at her cross-eyed. This is what the left is doing. This is what they are doing to themselves. Imagine how you feel about that friend. Imagine the credibility that you ascribe to that friend. You can only cry wolf so many times before people stop believing you. If everything is racist, then nothing is racist. If everything is catastrophic, important, end of the world, gravitas, then nothing is. And I have a feeling that this is why the left is so prone to violence these days. It's because they know their arguments don't work. Their plan B, which is calling everyone a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, has, that card has been played. What is left for them to do but to put on masks, raise their cities to the ground, and get violent? Not much. We'll be right back.
Kevin Jackson on the Black Sphere Radio Network.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Why do you want to say the N-word so badly?
If I don't use it, what makes you think you can?
Why do you always want to touch our hair?
Who told you it was okay to touch people without their permission?
Why do you feel like having one black friend makes you a cultural expert or not a racist?
Is your only black friend comfortable with being the reason why you can't be racist?
By that logic, then I'm not racist. I have a ton of white friends.
Why do you feel comfortable cursing at your parents?
Why do you kiss your dogs on the mouth?
How come you can't pronounce black names like Kouvanjane, but can say names like Schwarzenegger, Galifianakis, and LaBeouf just fine?
Why do you feel like all lions' lives matter, but black lives don't?
Why is a lion's life in Africa more important than the lives of black people here in America? What did Simba ever do for you?
I get it. Lion King was an awesome movie. But so was Selma, and so was Malcolm X.
Why is it so hard for you to acknowledge your privilege?
How does it feel to not be the spokesperson for your entire race at any given time?
Must be nice.
Must be nice. Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. Of course, I am guest hosting for the day. This is Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. That was a BuzzFeed video. BuzzFeed is getting really racist. Never go full on racist, BuzzFeed. It's absolutely incredible. That video was 24 questions that black people have for white people. We went through a bunch of these earlier. I answered a bunch of these questions, but to be honest, I didn't want to answer all of them, so I let the audio ride a little bit afterwards. I mean, if you can't see the racism blaring in those questions, why is it okay? Why do you let your dogs lick your face? As if every single white person owns a dog and lets the dog lick its face. I'm a cat person. I don't like dogs. I like dogs, but from a reasonable distance, but I don't want one as a pet. Now that's what these black folks think that white people think of them. They think that white people think that black folks are just pets. Now, is it racist to think that all white people think that all black people are pets? I venture to say it's very racist. I venture to say that all white people do anything is racist, just as much as it is racist to say that all black people do blah, blah, blah. So BuzzFeed is chock full of racism. BuzzFeed hates white people. BuzzFeed, of course, buys into the whole idea of white supremacy and white guilt, and that white people should feel bad about everything and, feel bad for their very existence. But one of the questions that was asked in this video is actually really, really telling, even though it seems a little bit more of one of the benign questions.
Why do you freak out when black people are cast to play white fictional characters?
What's the big deal if Idris Elba plays James Bond? I would go see it twice.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about this. What's the big deal? Why do white people freak out when Idris Elba or somebody black plays the traditionally white fictional character? Me personally, I don't freak out, but I did a little research on the subject, and I wanted to know, because the first thing I thought of at that time was, well, you know what? Black folks, I mean, since we're addressing each other as a race, why don't we reverse that question? Because I personally don't see any reason to freak out if we get a black James Bond. But I want to know if the same applies in reverse. Would you be okay if a white guy were cast to play in a remake of Shaft, a traditionally black character? Like I said, personally, I don't care. It wasn't even that irritating that lefties tried to troll conservatives by casting Hamilton as a black guy, and nobody cared. I mean, some people were irritated by it, but nobody cared. But let me ask you something, black folks. What if we decided to cast Martin Luther King as a white guy? Would you have a problem with that? Would you have an issue with that? And we keep hearing on and on and on about how blacks are underrepresented in Hollywood. Blacks are underrepresented. There aren't enough blacks. Hashtag Oscars so white. Millionaires like Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith having the audacity, having the sack to come out and criticize Whitey because Oscar's so white. Will Smith? Give me a break. Now, if you really want to know, first of all, I don't buy into the idea that blacks are underrepresented in Hollywood. I don't buy into the idea that minorities are underrepresented in Hollywood. If a movie is made and it requires a black character or requires a Hispanic character or it requires a woman, they cast a black, Hispanic, or a woman. But in the 1970s, there was a new genre of movie, of television, emerging. It was movies like Shaft that had mainly black casts. The music was funk and soul. They depicted black culture, urban culture. And it was an opportunity for black folks who are just rising out of the civil rights era to make their mark on Hollywood. They started out as these niche movies, but then gained steam and went mainstream. But the NAACP, the leftists of the day, the race baiting, the race baiters, the race pimps, the Jesse Jacksons of the day, the Al Sharptons of the day, they couldn't have that. Black actors and black musicians were getting way too empowered. And race pimps hate that. Race pimps hate it when minorities are empowered. Now, in an attempt to shut down these movies, the NAACP basically coined a term, blaxploitation films. Blaxploitation. The idea that making movies about urban neighborhoods exploits blacks. The NAACP likened TV shows and movies like Shaft to racism. Even though black actors were given the opportunity in the 1970s to make their mark on Hollywood, the NAACP simply because a white man ultimately was the one who signed the check of the actor who played Shaft. Actors and musicians of the day, black actors and musicians of the day, were accused of being house Negroes, Uncle Toms, Oreos. And the NAACP effectively shut down an entire genre, a budding genre that welcomed black actors and musicians. Hashtag Oscars so white. You want to know why Oscars is so white? Because leftists of the 1970s shut down a budding film industry that was centered around the black experience in black neighborhoods. And not only did these movies outline some of the cultural aspects of what was going on at the time in the black community, but they also gave the opportunity for a lot of black actors, a lot of black musicians to rise up and make their mark on Hollywood. But the NAACP couldn't have that. It's blaxploitation. Democrat plantation style, the NAACP stopped a post-civil rights era blacks from succeeding in Hollywood. And leftists of the day unilaterally decided that it wasn't good for the black community to be in movies. It wasn't good for the black community to have movies about urban neighborhoods. It wasn't good for the black community to have movies that appeal to the black community. That they were just feeding the white system, the white supremacist system. I mean, well, who is going to be signing their checks? It's going to be a white guy. That's just indentured servitude. It's like slavery. Those Hollywood fat cats, they just want to oppress you by putting you in their movies. Because just like the BuzzFeed questionnaire that black people have for white people, the mere fact of a white person writing and signing a check over to a black person, that's slavery. Those actors might as well be slaves to the white man. Because a white man signed their check. Now, I don't believe that there is a disparity in Hollywood, but if there were one, look in the mirror, folks. You caused this. Look in the mirror, leftists. You caused this. You did this. And it's insane. In 2017, liberal protesters are showing up in droves to make sure that Colin Kaepernick has a job. What's the difference from now in the 70s, lefties? Why in the 70s were you protesting against blaxploitation films, but now now Colin Kaepernick is, if he doesn't have a job, that's racism. If they had a job in the 70s, that's racism. Now if they don't have a job in the 2000s, that's racism too. I mean, what's the difference from the 70s? Honestly, not much. The 49ers owner, Jed York, worth $100 million. He's a white guy. He signs Cap's checks. I mean, wouldn't that mean that liberals are protesting to send Cap back to the plantation where he would be beholden to the white man who signs his checks? Moral of the story is that liberals have no one to blame but themselves. Black culture had an opportunity to thrive in the mainstream in the 1970s with, quote, blaxploitation films, but race pimps in the 70s prevented that from happening by crying racism. Liberals, if you think that minorities are underrepresented in Hollywood, blame yourselves. This is your doing. This is Brett Siegel, the disgruntled millennial, in for Kevin Jackson. Get me at Shaq General. Kevin will be back tomorrow. Have a great night.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.